Afternoon YouTube, it's Edmund West here. I'm here to talk about something completely different from my two previous videos. I'm here to talk about what I consider obsolete professions, jobs which I think will not be needed in a few years' time. And they're very high profile ones, which makes their demise even more exciting. Okay? First one is accountants. Now, what's an accountant's job? An accountant is someone who's brilliant at maths who helps people evade or avoid taxes. Okay? Now, are they productive workers? Maybe from the businessman's point of view, but from our point of view, not at all. Not at all. They're undermining the welfare state. They create problems for taxmen. What do we need them for? Well, in this world, it's becoming easier and easier for rich people to dodge taxes. Partly thanks to their accountants, partly thanks to their lawyers, but mostly because of improved communications. It'll become harder and harder to levy tax, which means more and more services will be privatised. Now, eventually, I think everything will be privatised. Everything from soldiers to policemen, firemen, doctors, even roads. And in a world like that, where will be the place for accountants? You won't need them, will you? What do you need them for if there aren't any taxes? Or conversely, we might have another communist revolution, in which case we wouldn't need them either. The same goes for bureaucrats and politicians. In a completely privatised world, where would be the place for bureaucrats and politicians? What would bureaucrats be distributing? What would bureaucrats be interfering with? They wouldn't be allowed to. And what use would a politician be if there's nothing to regulate, if there's nothing to tax, if there's nothing to interfere with? What do we need them for? The most useful part of our civil service, is the Foreign Office, because it saves millions of pounds and millions of lives by preventing wars. But surely, in a globalised world, eventually we'll have a world state, because countries will trade with each other more and more, which means they'll be more reluctant to fight each other. It means the advantages of federation and eventual merger will be too great to miss. Think of how wonderful a world state could be. No more silly passports, no more silly currencies, no more silly immigration restrictions. I'm getting off the topic a bit. And of course, without war, what will you need soldiers for? Soldiery is often thought of as a great profession, but just bear in mind a quarter of homeless people in Britain are ex-military because they've got used to not having to pay bills, not having to look for somewhere to work, not having to look for somewhere to live. So they find civilian life difficult to adjust to. Okay? My next point is the upper classes. Now, according to Geoffrey Page, author of Agrarian Revolution, the upper classes only exist because of state interference in markets. An upper class person is someone who owns the land and rents it out to farmers. So I'm not including plantation owners here because they run their farms as factories. Running a farm as a factory or in small units is far more efficient than the aristocratic way. We have no need for them. We can do without them easily. Translators. What do we need translators for? We spend hundreds of millions of euros and dollars on translators, making sure every EU directive is in every single language, no matter if just 20 people speak it. 60% of people in the EU speak English. We really don't need to be learning foreign languages, and we really shouldn't need translators. Once again, I'm sure they're very clever people, but we don't need them doing that. We want them to do something different. Okay? I wasted 3 lessons a week learning French. I had a wonderful teacher, but why was I doing that? If everybody spoke exactly the same language, whether it's English, Mandarin, or Swahili, surely we can learn more subjects at school. That has to be a good thing, doesn't it? And if you really want to learn language, why not sign language or shorthand? They're much more useful in my opinion. So when I hear the statistic that a language dies out every fortnight, I don't think, oh no, how terrible. I think, can't it be a bit faster? Organised crime. They can only make their multi-millions because gambling, prostitution and drugs are illegal. If you just legalised those things, their grip on politics, on power, on clandestine economics would vanish. We only create value in those services because they're illegal. The harder you fight them, the more powerful they become. Look at Mexico. Those cartels are much more powerful than our drugs gangs, precisely because the government's fighting harder against them. Okay. In fact, heroin was only associated with organised crime from the 1920s because people like Al Capone recognised eventually alcohol would be legalised, which means the market price would plummet. So they adopted heroin as insurance, as something to fall back on after that. And they were right, it was legalised in 1933. And America clearly not learned its lesson. Okay? I have one more profession on my list, and that's lawyers, but we'll have to leave them later, because I have a lot to say about those people. Thanks. Bye, YouTube.